Hello folks and welcome back to the channel. It is a beautiful sunny day again. It's a wonderful day to be out on the bank and we are at one of my favourite venues. This is Shearsby Valley Lakes. We're on a lake that I've not really fished a lot of before. This is Willow Pool. Now this place is absolutely rammed to the brim with F1s and small carp. It's a fish every chuck. And what I'm going to do today is hopefully show you the fastest and most effective way to build a big weight of F1s and small carp shallow. I've got my box on the peg, I'm going to get the rest of my gear set up and then I'll run you through my approach. Well folks, have I got a brilliant tactic for you lot. This is the Jigger. Now it's been around for quite a while, you know, a lot of you guys probably know how to fish a Jigger, but some of you, I'm guessing, don't even know what a Jigger is. So let's start with the basics. What is a Jigger? Now a Jigger is usually a rugby ball shaped float and the line runs freely through the centre. Now the bore on that tube running through the centre of that float needs to be quite big. You want the float to run as free as possible on the line because this is a self-hooking rig. Those fish are going to hook themselves on the elastic, on the pole tip. You're hardly going to miss a bite. Now in the past there was a lot of problems with F1s especially up in the water. You'd be slapping away, you'd be trying really light rigs and you'd just be missing bites all the time as those fish flash at the pellet or whatever hook bait you're using and they spit it out in lightning quick time. You miss loads of bites. This Jigger stops all that. So how do we set the Jigger up? Like we said, we've got to have it free running on the line. Quite a few venues, some venues especially, stipulate that you must have some sort of stop above the Jigger because there's a minimum line rule. So quite often I'll set my Jigger rigs up with a stop above the Jigger. That just means that the Jigger can't run all the way up to the pole tip. Obviously if your venue stipulates that there's a 4-inch length of line between pole tip and float, obviously you're getting around that rule by putting that stop there. Today there's no rules, so I'm going to place that stop all the way up to the knot that connects my elastic to my rig. Now I've got the Jigger, as I say, free running on the line. I've got 3 number 8 slot shot just above a 4-inch hook length. The main line is 0.18. I think a stiffer main line works really well. The hook length is 0.12. Remember, we're fishing for F1s. We've got a size 18 hook on and we've got a bait band whipped onto the hair, really tight to the hook. Again, we're fishing for F1s, they've got small mouths. We want to make sure that when that hook pellet goes in, the hook goes in as well. Now, the elastic setup, I think connecting your line direct to your elastic is the way to go when you're any sort of shallow fishing. It makes the rig super direct. There isn't any dacron connector that needs to straighten before the fish hooks itself against your pole tip. So I've got a little bead arrangement. It's simply a case of a little tiny knot on my elastic. I loop my main line around that knot and then I've got a little bead that pulls down and creates a really nice, neat attachment there. And you can see that's super direct to the pole tip. The elastic is a Cerise reactor core. It's rated, I'd say 10 to 12, something like that. Perfect for these little F1s. I mean, the fish that we're targeting, they're sort of 8 ounce a piece average, I'd say. You can build a weight really fast with them and they are ravenous. Now, let's talk about why we're using a Jigger over a standard shallow rig. You'll see when I get going and when I start fishing away, there's loads of fish in the swim. You know, we've not got any shortage of fish and there's a lot of venues up and down the country, Snake Lakes in particular, where F1s are stocked, where this is the case. There's a lot of F1s in a lot of venues now. And during the summer months, they go mad for pellets, casters, light sort of smaller baits. They swirl for them, they're like a foot deep. They can be a nightmare to catch effectively. And in the past, we'd use a nice little light float. We'd be slapping the rig. We'd be trying to fish it dotted down so there's no resistance. And it's great. It's a brilliant way of fishing. And quite often I'll start on that method just to work out sort of what depth the fish are feeding at. The trouble with that method is you miss loads of bites. They feel the resistance of the float, they spit the bait out really quick. You just get yourself into a ravel sometimes. This Jigger have solved all those problems because, like I say, the fish is hooking itself straight away on the pole tip. Now what I want to do is just do a little bit of fishing for you and just show you how effective the Jigger is. Now we've just come straight from another session, so I'm not totally prepared for fishing a jigger. There's a load of fish in this lake, and what I would definitely have brought if I'd have known is some prepared hooker pellets, because varnishing a hooker pellet or super gluing a hooker pellet, it can be a superb bait because it just tends to last longer. You can catch a lot of fish. There's no fish straight away. You can catch a lot of fish on the same pellet, whereas now for today's session I've literally got a bag of 4 mils from the shop, and I'm gonna probably have to change my pellet every fish, which is gonna slow me down, but never mind. First fish of our little whirlwind session, classic commercial fishery F1, probably about 10 ounces, something like that. A sucker for the jigger. So you'll notice that what I'm trying to do, as with every method, feeding is really important. So I'm trying to feed every opportunity. So we're slapping the rig in the swim, feed some pellets over the top. Obviously this isn't a method for the lazy angler. It's going to be very, very busy. That fish just popped off there, probably not hooked quite nicely. So when we get going, I'll talk you through how we're going to present the rig and how we're fishing, but just for now I want to show you guys just the feeding pattern and just give you an idea of how active you need to be for this particular method. Like I say, if we were fishing a match on this particular venue, or a venue like this where this sort of speed fishing was going to come into play, we'd probably have a few more refinements to the kit, because we could definitely speed things up just a little bit. Obviously we're doing quite well, but we could definitely speed things up a little bit. That's two fish we've lost now. Probably just not hooking them right. Let's just see if we can plough through it. You're always going to lose an odd fish when you're catching so many. You can see feeding all the time. I mean, they're really high up now, these fish. In actual fact, it might be worth trying to feed a little bit more just to try and keep them down, because quite often when you get these quick bites, they're the ones that pop off. So the crack is, when you're putting the rig into the swim, obviously we all know that fish love a bit of noise on the water surface, so slapping the rig on the water surface, make a nice bit of noise, and then we're trying to hold the float, we're trying to hold our pole tip above the float, and that's what's going to keep that tight line between the hook bait and the pole tip. And you might think to yourself, why do you even need the float? You could probably just fish a little bit of line and it'd do the same job. There's a couple of reasons. Firstly, I think this is a bigger fish. Firstly, some venues insist that you use a float on your rig, so they don't like that direct style of fishing. And obviously this gets round that rule perfectly. I mean, he's a nice chunky F1. Look at that. He's probably, I don't know, not quite 2 pounds, but he's definitely 1.5 pounds. I'll take one of them every chuck. So that jigger gets round the no float rule at a lot of venues. Plus, you can see today we've got quite a nasty wind on the water surface. It's skimming through a little bit, and that jigger just acts as like a stabiliser to the line. It means that the line isn't drifting all over the place. We're actually keeping control of the hook bait a little bit better. So, you know, it is worth using a jigger rather than just whacking a bit of line on your pole and a couple of shot above the hook. Like I say, that does work on a lot of venues, but I think to be on the safe side, it's a jigger 9 times out of 10. You can see it's brilliant fishing when you get going. I mean, this lake is absolutely perfect for this style of fishing. Ran with F1s. I think F1s are the prime target when you're fishing a jigger. That's not to say it doesn't work for carp, but I always feel that you can catch carp effectively using a float. It's just that F1s can sometimes be a right pain when you're fishing a float. They feel that resistance straight away. And spit the hook bait out, and this is the perfect rig, because before they have a chance to spit it out, they're already hooked. So let's go into the feeding a little bit more in depth, because you can see that we're trying not to keep our arms out of the bait tub. So every little opportunity I get, I'm feeding some bait. So as soon as I ship out, quite often we're pulling a fish back, to be honest, by the time I ship out, but I'm shipping out, slapping my rig, my hand's in the tub already, feed some pellets over the top, slap the rig, pole tip over the float, a couple of little lifts of the pole tip. And then when we get the fish to netting range, feed a few more pellets. And it is a really, I'm going to call it efficient. It's an efficient way of fishing. I would say that for anyone that's not mega confident straight away with the jigger, I think it's definitely worth setting up a standard float rig as well, just a light float for fishing shallow, because what you'll find is you'll get indications on a float, you'll get line bites, and it'll tell you that there's fish in the swim and give you a little bit of confidence that there is fish in your swim. And then it's just a case of obviously setting your jigger up to when you start missing bites, or if you want to really up your catch rate, and you can set your jigger up then at the correct depth. You know, you can start working it at the right depth in the swim. The trouble is with using a jigger, oh, he's a lovely F1, he's definitely £2. The trouble is with using a jigger straight away, if you've not got the confidence on it, you could be fishing away and you never get an indication, you never feel like this. I mean, that is a beautiful fish, isn't it? £2 all day long. You never seem to get an indication that there's fish in your swim. So you could be working that jigger and you don't know if you're getting it quite right. That's when obviously switching to that float will give you some indications. So slap it in the water, lift up a couple of times, trying to keep the pole tip nice and tight to the hook bait. If you're not getting bites, you need to be working. That's why it's finding that critical depth of water, working it through the swim. It's not a case of watching the float at all, it's really just making sure that you're lifting into a fish all the time. Feed again. So there we go. Hope you like that little whistle stop tour of the Jigger. A brilliant method if you're targeting F1s and they're feeding shallow. I'm going to carry on fishing. Until next time, guys, tight lines.